Montana Territory, November 1880. The wind cut like a knife through the pines, carrying snow and silence down the Bitterroot Range. Travis Tilden pulled his coat tighter as he rode, eyes sharp beneath a bent-brimmed hat. He had been riding since dawn, trailing a half-lame mule and a wagon wheel that had split in half 2 days back. He was not heading anywhere in particular, just drifting south, same as always, chasing work and warmth when the sky turned mean. But the world changed at the bend in the creek. He almost missed them. Just a flicker in the trees, a shape too still, too quiet. He reined in his horse and listened. Then he heard it, a cough, ragged and small. He dismounted, boots crunching over frost-lace leaves, and stepped through the low brush. There, under a thin canvas tied between 2 trees, was a woman curled around 2 boys. A dead fire pit lay cold beside them. The woman looked up, face pale, lips cracked. Her arms were wrapped around her sons, both buried in threadbare coats. "Ma'am," Travis said, slow and quiet, keeping his hands where she could see them. "You folks all right?" The older boy stirred, around 8 or 9 by the look of him, but the younger was barely moving. "No," the woman rasped. "We are not." Travis dropped to one knee beside them. "How long have they been like this?" "Since yesterday," she whispered. "We lost the road. Snow came fast. I tried to get the fire going again, but the matches are gone." Her eyes fluttered shut for a second. "We are so tired." He stood up fast. "I have a camp half a mile from here. Fire, blankets, food. We need to get them warm now." She did not argue. Travis scooped up the younger boy first, cradling the child's tiny frame against his chest. "Watch my back," he said to the older boy, who nodded and grabbed a crooked stick like it was a rifle. The woman staggered as she stood, but Travis caught her elbow. "Lean on me." "My name is Odessa," she said, voice shaking. "Odessa Pike." "Travis Tilden," he answered. "Let's get you home for the night." His camp was nestled in a pocket of rock, with a fire already burning and a canvas lean-to pitched against the wind. He laid the younger boy Wilmer. Odessa called him close to the fire, careful not to overheat him. The older boy, Warren, sat stiffly, watching Travis with wide, wary eyes. Odessa knelt beside her sons, brushing snow from their hair. Her hands trembled. Travis handed her a blanket. "You need to warm up, too." She held the wool to her chest. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not have to," he said. He fed them all beans, hard bread, and hot coffee for Odessa. Wilmer stirred enough to take a few sips of warm broth, and the sight of him blinking up at his mother eased something deep in Travis's chest. Later, after the boys had fallen asleep curled beside each other, Odessa sat beside the fire, her knees pulled up to her chest. Travis sat across from her, cleaning out his coffee tin. "Where were you headed?" he asked.
"Fort Benton," she said.
"I was told there was work there. My husband died last spring. Consumption. We could not stay in Helena. No money left. No kin. I am sorry." She nodded, eyes on the flames. "I try to be strong for them. But I thought we would die out there." "You did not," he said. "You found me." She looked at him then. Really looked. "Why did you help us?" Travis shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "Because I could." She was quiet a long time. Then, softly, "You saved our lives, Mr. Tilden." He looked up. Her face was tired, but there was something steady in her gaze now. Something that had not been there earlier. "You can call me Travis." She smiled just a little. "Thank you, Travis." That night, a heavy snow came down. Travis gave up his own bedroll, so the boys would have more warmth. He sat by the fire, adding wood and watching over them while they slept. Odessa, wrapped in his extra coat, fell asleep leaning against a sack of oats. He did not sleep. Some things were worth guarding. By morning, the snow had stopped. The world outside the lean-to was a silent, white sea. Travis packed up the camp, gave Warren a job gathering kindling, and let Wilmer ride atop the mule as they headed downhill. Odessa walked beside him, her steps still slow, but her chin lifted. "You heading to Fort Benton still?" he asked. "I think so," she said. Unless? She hesitated. "I do not know what comes next. I only know we are alive today, because of you." He glanced at her. "You do not have to decide anything today." She nodded. "But I want to earn my keep. I do not want charity." "You are not getting charity," he said. "You are getting a warm place to stay and a hand when you need one. That is just how it should be." She looked at him again, that same clear way she had last night by the fire. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something more, but she did not. They kept walking. By the time they reached a small line shack a few miles south, the sun was out, and the snow had started to melt from the pines. The cabin was no more than 4 walls and a roof, but it had a stove and a dry floor. Travis lit a fire and let the boys pick bunks. Odessa stood in the doorway, her face soft in the light. "I do not know how to repay you," she said again. He stepped closer. "You do not have to. You and the boys can stay here until you figure out where you want to go." "And you?" "I will be around," he said, half smiling. She reached out then, slow and unsure, and took his hand. Her fingers were small and cool against his. "I am glad you found us," she said quietly. He wrapped his hand around hers. "Me too." They stood there, the fire crackling behind them, the snow melting off the roof in soft, steady drops. Travis had not expected to find anything out here but cold and silence. But now he had a reason to stay. The cabin held heat well. Smoke twisted lazily from the stovepipe as morning crept over the ridgeline, pale and gold. Inside, the air smelled faintly of ash and rye flour. Odessa stood at the table, sleeves rolled to her elbows, kneading dough with slow, thoughtful hands. The boys were still asleep. Wilmer curled beneath a quilt, Warren sprawled sideways with one foot tucked under his chin. Travis leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. Her hair was tied back with a strip of muslin, and there was a smudge of flour along her jaw. She didn't notice him at first. Her face was quiet, focused. That same calm set to her brow he'd seen when she'd walked beside him through the snow. "I found some dried currants," he said finally. She glanced over her shoulder. "Are they sweet?" "Enough to make 2 boys think they're rich men." She smiled with the side of her mouth. "Then I'll fold them in before the rise." He stepped aside as she passed to fetch the bowl. Her shoulder brushed his chest just a graze, but it stayed with him longer than it should have. She didn't pull away. "I haven't baked since summer," she said, sprinkling the currants into the dough. "We sold the stove before we left town. Everything we owned that wasn't nailed down." "You ever work a farm?" "My folks had a small orchard outside Missoula. Apples mostly. My father kept bees." Travis moved toward the window, pushed back the curtain with 2 fingers. "There's a line of cottonwoods below the ridge. Soil's good there. If someone wanted to plant come spring." She paused, fingers still sunk in the dough. "You think we'll still be here come spring?" "I reckon it's up to you." She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. The boys woke slow, blinking against the morning light. Warren rubbed his eyes, then climbed down from the bunk to help stack kindling. Wilmer sat on the floor beside the stove, wrapped in the quilt, watching the flame like it might tell him a secret. "I'll take the axe out," Travis said, nodding toward the woodpile. Storm broke a few limbs off the pine. Might as well gather what's dry. Odessa lifted the dough from the bowl, set it gently near the stove to rise. "Warren, help him. Bring in what you can carry." Outside, the snow had glazed over, crusty and thin. Travis handed the boy a small hatchet. "You know what you're doing with that?" "I've split stumps before," Warren said, drawing his chin up. Not big ones. Travis nodded. Then show me. They worked in silence for a time, the rhythm of steel on wood echoing between the trees. Travis didn't say much, but he kept close, correcting Warren's grip now and then, pointing out which branches would burn cleanest. You always live alone? Warren asked suddenly, not looking up. Most days. Why? Travis set down the axe, wiped his hands on his trousers. Some folks stay moving. Others stay planted. I haven't figured which I am yet. Warren didn't answer, just dragged a small limb toward the cabin, boots slipping a little on the ice. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, the bread was baking in a blackened tin pan, and the smell had drawn Wilmer out from his blanket. He watched Odessa slice a sliver off the heel, steam curling up from the crust. Is it ready? He asked. Almost, she said, handing him the knife. Cut small, we've got to make it last. Travis came in last, snow melting off his coat. Hawk circling east of the tree line, he said. Might be rabbit nearby. Odessa handed him the metal plate. You always see that kind of thing? If I don't, I go hungry. She sat across from him at the table, folding her hands. You ever think about settling somewhere? He chewed slowly, swallowed. Sometimes. Depends on the company. Her eyes held his for a long moment. That night, they sat on the porch steps while the boys played marbles in the dirt. The ground was still hard, but the sky had gone soft with dusk. Somewhere near the creek, a bullfrog called. My husband never knew how to sit still, Odessa said, arms folded across her knees. He was always fixing, planning, worrying. I used to think the world owed him peace. And you, I think. I'd settle for a place where no one's cold. Travis turned his head. You've got that now. For a while, she said. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached down and brushed a bit of bark from the step beside her boot. If I stayed through the thaw, he said, we could fence that east slope. Put in a coop. Maybe a garden. She didn't speak right away. Then, quiet as the wind in the branches, she said, then maybe spring won't be so far off. He nodded once, slow. Maybe not. The light changed in late November. It came through the trees lower, softer, catching on the frost that held fast along the eaves of the cabin. Odessa stepped carefully along the edge of the ridge that morning, a basket looped over one arm, a wool shawl tight around her shoulders. Travis walked a few paces ahead, scanning the underbrush for signs of hair. The boys were warm back at the cabin, Warren tending the fire, Wilmer building a tower of stacked kindling. Odessa's fingers were stained with the juice of chokeberries she'd gathered earlier, and she kept her eyes low, scanning for the dark blue shine of more beneath the brush. Do you always hunt alone? She asked, brushing her hand past a low pine. Only when I've got no one to walk with, Travis said. He drew to a stop and crouched beside a set of paw prints, half filled with snow. Elk passed through here yesterday evening. She knelt beside him, bracing her weight on a rock. You can tell that from just the tracks? Fresh snow settled different in the back of the print. And there's no ice crust inside. That's how I know it wasn't this morning. She studied the indentation. I never learned that sort of thing. My father could read the sky, but not the ground. You could learn. He stood and offered her his hand. If you wanted. She took it, her fingers rough from work but warm. I think I might. They walked on, the hush of the woods wrapping around them. A raven called somewhere above, then winged westward through the branches. You always carry that rifle? She asked. Never saw a reason not to. Her skirt caught on a bramble, and she paused to free it. My husband, he never liked guns. Said they were made for fear. Travis glanced at her, then at the trees ahead. I think they're made for choice. Whether or not to stand between danger and something worth keeping. She didn't reply right away. Then, quiet, she said, and what's worth keeping? He looked at her then, fully. Whatever you'd go hungry to protect. They didn't speak for some time after that. The trail curved around a thicket of young aspen and led down toward the creek, where the water ran shallow and fast between ice-slick stones. Travis knelt again, brushing a hand across a patch of snow. Rabbit's been through here. 2, maybe 3. Odessa crouched beside him. You ever teach a boy to trap? He gave a short nod.
A few.
Why? Warren's been asking what he can do besides chop wood. She hesitated. He wants to be useful. I think he's afraid he isn't. He's got steady hands, Travis said. And he listens. She looked surprised. You noticed that? I notice more than I let on. They sat on a fallen log and shared a strip of dried meat from his pouch. Odessa chewed slowly, her eyes on the creek. I used to think I knew what life was, she said quietly. A house, a husband, a routine. But now, I don't know. It feels like I'm waking up to something different. Travis set his hands on his knees. That different thing, does it scare you? Some of it. She turned her head. But not all. He watched her for a long moment. I don't want to take anything from you. You haven't, she said. You've only given. The wind rose then, pushing through the trees with a sound like breathing. She stood and brushed the bark from her skirt. Her basket was nearly full. We should head back, she said. They'll be waiting. They turned toward the trail, walking side by side. He didn't touch her, not yet, but he kept pace with her steps, matching the rhythm of her breath, her silences. Back at the cabin, Warren had tended the fire well. The little hearth glowed with steady warmth. Wilmer leapt from his blanket to show them his tower, and Odessa crouched to admire it, brushing a hand through his hair. Later, as dusk pressed down on the windows, Travis stepped outside to check the sky. Odessa followed him, arms folded. Clouds are thin, he said. Might be clear tonight. She looked up. I'd forgotten how many stars lived in the sky. He tilted his head, studying her face in the blue light. You ever miss what you had before? She took a long breath. I miss the parts that were good, but not the feeling of waiting for the bottom to fall out. He nodded once. You won't have to wait for that here. She turned to him then, full and quiet. I know. And she reached for his hand, not with hesitation, but with the certainty of someone who had walked through cold and come out the other side. Travis laced his fingers through hers, warm and sure. Inside, the boys laughed over something small. The sound curled out through the door, soft and clean. Odessa didn't look away from Travis. I think I'm starting to believe in spring again. He leaned in, his voice low. Then we'll build it together. The days settled into a rhythm, not rushed but certain, like horses moving at a steady walk, knowing the trail without needing reins. Late November lingered, the ground hardening underfoot, but the snow held off. Travis had begun cutting a path toward the eastern slope where the sun touched longest. He worked with Warren at his side, showing him how to mark tree lines and measure each step with care. Odessa took to mending by the hearth, her fingers nimble over torn seams. Wilmer lay nearby with a carved wooden whistle Travis had shaped from willow bark, blowing it with serious intent until Odessa gently coaxed him to rest his lungs. One afternoon, Travis returned from checking the distant trapline, a hair slung over his shoulder. Odessa met him near the lean-to, her eyes scanning the sky. That the last snare you set?
For now.
Nothing stirred past the bluff, he said. Air shifting. She glanced east. Feels like real winter's coming. It is. She brushed her hand down her skirt, the fabric worn soft with use. Come spring, do you think the soil up here would take to beans? Pale ones, maybe. You'd want to break the ground before the thaw. Heavy root vegetables do better. He paused. You're thinking long term. She stepped closer, the wind tugging her shawl loose. I never thought I'd be planning ahead again. Not past morning, anyway. Her voice didn't tremble, but there was a rawness in it, like the edge of something that had been held back too long. Travis set the hair down beside the chopping block. "You don't have to explain it." "I want to," she said. "Not because I owe it. Just because you keep showing up like you mean to stay." He met her gaze.
Ida.
She breathed in slow, then looked toward the cabin. "After Harlan died, I couldn't cry. Not for weeks. It was like my body had forgotten how. I just kept moving, feeding the boys, packing what I could carry. I thought if I stopped, everything would cave in." He waited, not speaking over her. "I still hear his cough some nights," she said. "But it's fading. Not because I'm forgetting, but because there's something else now. Something steady." The wind shifted again, colder this time. Travis pulled the shawl higher on her shoulder. "I ain't in the habit of promising what I can't hold to. But if you're building something here, I'll be part of it. Not just for the season." She looked down, then back up at him, her voice barely above the wind. "You're already part of it." That night, Wilmer fell asleep with one of Travis's shirts pulled over his small frame, the sleeves hanging long past his hands. Warren stayed up late by the fire, listening as Travis showed him how to string a rabbit's foot onto twine. Odessa watched them from the table, her hands still over her sewing, though she hadn't stitched in some time. When the boys were finally tucked into their bedrolls, Odessa poured the last of the boiled chicory into 2 cups and brought one to Travis, where he sat near the stove. "You ever think you'd end up here?" she asked, easing down beside him. He took the cup. "Didn't think that far ahead." She sipped. "I used to think life would come in grand turns. But it's the small choices that changed everything. Moving left instead of right. Taking a stranger's hand." They sat in the quiet, the fire crackling low. Travis turned her wrist gently, tracing the faint scar near her knuckle. "You ever tell them stories?" "Only when the wind's bad. I make up ones where the wolves talk and the trees whisper warnings." She smiled a little. "They like the ones where mothers turn into bears to protect their cubs." He nodded. "Sounds like the truth, even if it isn't." She leaned her head against his shoulder then, the weight of it sure. "I don't want to be afraid again," she said. "You won't be," he answered. Outside, the sky cleared, stars gathering sharp against the black. Inside, the warmth held, quiet and constant. Odessa didn't move, and neither did he. They stayed like that, the fire fading to embers, the night closing in soft and complete. The morning Odessa asked Travis to build a root cellar. The ground was still stiff with frost, but the sun had begun to climb earlier each day. The boys were off gathering dried spruce cones for kindling, their boots leaving narrow trails across the slope behind the cabin. A steady wind moved through the trees, but not sharp the way it had been weeks ago. There was a softness in it now, like the land was beginning to breathe again. "I've been thinking," she said, pulling her shawl close. "If we want to store anything past spring, we'll need a place where it stays cool." Travis set down the spade he'd been sharpening. "I saw a hollow near the bluff that drains east. Shade most of the day. It'd hold." She brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "That's what I figured. If we dig deep enough, line it proper, it'll keep through summer." He studied her a moment. "You sound like someone planning to be here when the days get long." Her gaze held his, solid and warm. "I mean to be." They started that afternoon. Travis broke the ground with the spade while Odessa cleared stones from the edge. She worked steady, her hands wrapped in scraps of old flour sack, and didn't pause unless he did. They didn't speak much, but they didn't need to. Their rhythm said enough. 2 people shaping something lasting from the cold earth. By the time the sun dipped low, they had a shallow trench and a pile of flat stones stacked nearby. Odessa stood back, wiping her brow with the back of her wrist. "We'll need timber," she said, "and something to brace the roof." "I'll take Warren out tomorrow," Travis replied. "That stand of deadfall past the ridge should do." She nodded, then turned toward the cabin, her pace unhurried. Inside, Wilmer sat on the floor with a length of twine, trying to tie knots the way Travis had shown him. The child's tongue poked from the corner of his mouth in concentration. Odessa bent to press a kiss to the top of his head before stirring the pot on the stove. The scent of lentils and sage filled the room. That evening, Odessa took the mending from the shelf and sat with Travis near the fire. Her fingers moved through a tear in Wilmer's sleeve, neat and practiced. "I never thought I'd be sewing beside a man again," she said. "Not like this." He didn't look up from his task shaping a handle for the draw knife, but his voice was quiet when he answered. "Does it feel wrong?"
"No," she said.
Then, after a moment, "It feels safe. And I didn't think I'd ever say that again, either." The cabin had grown warmer as the fire burned low. Travis set the knife handle aside and reached for her hand. She let him take it, her fingers resting lightly in his palm. "I've been thinking, too," he said, "about what's next." Her eyes searched his, steady and sure. "I've spent most of my life without a roof or a reason to stay long," he continued. "But now there's a garden to turn and boys to teach, and you." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Odessa set her sewing aside, leaned forward, and kissed him quiet and certain, the way spring breaks through frozen ground, not all at once, but enough to change everything. The next weeks passed with the slow fullness of work well done. They lined the cellar with stone and framed it with timber. Warren learned to square a beam with confidence, and Wilmer took to helping his mother string rows of beans to dry. They started a coop with salvaged boards from an abandoned shed Travis came across while hunting. Odessa taught the boys to seal jars, and Travis taught them to listen for weather in the way the air changed beneath the trees. One bright morning, Travis took Odessa's hand and led her to the edge of the bluff. The sky stretched wide, and the valley below was beginning to green. "I don't have much," he said, "but I've got my word, and I'd like to give you that if you'll have it."
She didn't hesitate.
"I already do." They were married beneath the cottonwoods 2 days later. Odessa wore her mother's brooch, the one she'd kept wrapped in a handkerchief since Helena. Travis shaved and wore a clean collar. Warren stood as witness, straight-backed and proud, and Wilmer carried a braid of sweetgrass tied in a ribbon of Odessa's old blouse. That night, they sat on the porch, the boys asleep inside, their hands laced together as stars blinked awake one by one. "This is our place now," she said. He kissed her knuckles. "And it always will be." Years passed quietly. The garden grew straight rows of turnips and beans, and the chickens laid through the first winter. Warren carved his own set of traps by 16, and Wilmer could read aloud from Odessa's childhood primer by the time he turned 8. The cabin was repaired, then added to a second room, a porch roof, a narrow shelf for Odessa's jars. Travis never wandered again. When the winds turned cold each year, he stacked the wood high and checked the cellar twice. Odessa baked bread with a new softness to her smile. They slept side by side, her hand always within reach of his, and the boys grew taller with shoulders broad and eyes full of steadiness. No one ever came looking for more than they had. And nothing was missing. Their life was not grand, but it was whole-built, slow and true, like the earth that held their cellar firm and cool. And they were happy.